welcome to the Radical Retro Rewind podcast. It's me, Ryan Hunter, along with David, and we are doing our next Thundercats Friday episode, which is Season 1, Episode 4, The Slaves of Castle Plun-Darr.
Dun 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 dun.
So this starts off with Wily Kit and Wily Cat playing in the forest when they discover that the mutants have enslaved a race of primitive beings whom they refer to as Brutemen, and they are forcing them to build Castle Plun-Darr. So this is the mutants' version of the cat's lair.
Yep, and it's their version of slavery.
Yeah, so the Brutemen are also animal-looking beings. They draw them almost as, quote-unquote, blank-looking as the character's supposed to be. So they're supposed to be a primitive race of, I guess, animal. They're like a mix between very animal. They're brown animal people.
They look like a hyena / chihuahua.
They have long nose, like long
They have snouts.
snoots.
Yeah.
And the way they draw them, you could see they have this look of like blankness on their face. They're supposed to be almost like, without question, easily enslaved because evidently everyone's peaceful on Third Earth, the peaceful burbles. This is a peaceful group of...
The worst place to be peaceful. The absolute worst place to be peaceful is Third Earth.
Right? And you're able to be enslaved so easily by the mutants with their mutant technology. So Wily Kit and Wily Cat are watching Monkey in sleep when this begins. And they accidentally knock some kind of, looks like a coconut on his head. Not that it's a coconut, but some kind of tree fruit, which doesn't look like candy fruit, fell on his head, and then he chases them. They are cunning enough to get away, but they do have this whole conversation about what are they doing, what are those creatures they're enslaved. So they're very upset about this, the Thunder Kitten.
What's interesting is I like the fact that I like the interaction that Monkey has with them, because he's like, you might be cats, but I'm a monkey, and you're trying to escape through the trees. Like, he clearly has the advantage. Cats definitely are cunning and they can jump from trees and stuff like that, but in this sense, the monkey it has the advantage of swinging through the trees.
But what did Wily Kit say? You're a knuckle walker or something like this?
Knuckle dragger.
Knuckle dragger. So he's saying that he's a ape.
Yeah, they're very
knuckle dragger. Yes.
Yeah. So they chase. There's a chase going on through the trees, and Wily Kit ends up... There's a point where she's like, Monkey, come here. And he comes, he's like, oh, you can't wait.
You can't wait.
You're like clobbering up.
But they end up getting away because even though Monkey is a monkey and he has the advantage, Thunder Kittens are just more cunning, fast.
They threw those little capsule things that they have, like their Batman...
explosive pellets.
Yeah, they're like their Batman utility belt things that they have. Some explode, some make bubbles, some are slick. They use some kind of thing to make the branch slick, and Monkey falls.
So then they run back to the cat's lair that is still being built, but it's pretty much done at this point. Tigra and Chitara are having a conversation about how Burbles were able to follow their plans to a T, and thankful for that. They're overlooking outside Panther with the Burbles, and they see that Wily Kit and Wily Cat are running, and Panther says, hold on, I think everyone wants to hear this. So they're telling them about this group of beings that the mutants are enslaving, and the Burbles act out what they equate these creatures to be, like very he makes it almost like
which is funny because the Burbles are like whatever, their little like electronic voices. I want to point out that Wily Kit and Wily Cat are physically shaken and physically upset. Like, it's palatable. Like, they're so upset that they're seeing that these poor creatures called Brutemen are being enslaved. They're actually, like, it's a very physical reaction to what they've seen. So it's almost like they haven't seen such a horrible thing as slavery before, I guess, on Thundarr. So.
That must be what it is. Yeah, Thundarr must be almost like a utopia, and they're probably saying, wow. And it's funny, you're right, because you're seeing it through that kid's like eyes, what something like a slavery and enslaving people does to them. So yeah, I noticed that as well. Great point. So they explain everything that's going on, and then the Burbles do explain that the Brutemen are gentle beings who lack intelligence.
Yeah, Chitara says something like, when, I don't know if it's Rope or Bill or whichever
Yeah,
one
it's Robert Bill, I think.
says this, like he says there's point, like there's not much upstairs, and Chitara's like, oh, so there's not much upstairs. So they're very simple. They're simple creatures.
So they're simple, and they don't even have a language, really.
And they're cheap. They're cheap labor, really. Let's be honest.
Really cheap labor.
Flavor.
Well, if not for anything, the mutants just have them like in a room. Like they just have them like literally hiding in a room with the door closed.
I know, and like Sly's like, get in there, Brutemen.
Yeah, and they're so
docile.
They're so docile. Yeah, they leave the cat's lair to Kit and Cat to stay behind, and the Thundercats leave in the Thunder Tank to Castle Plun-Darr. So this is the first time of them seeing Castle Plun-Darr. So they had these Brutemen build this almost, it looks like a lizard bat creature with wings, and the wings actually close up as a defense mechanism.
I like that.
I don't know how they had time to
It's
build
actually
this.
like Wonder Woman 1984 when she has those wing things that she has these golden wings that she closes up when Cheetah attacks her.
The Thundercats break through a surrounding barricade with ease. Yeah, I like this part. So they realize that the Thundercats are going to be on their way because the kittens were there. So Slive says that, you know, the kittens saw, so the Thundercats are going to be on their way to probably free the Brutemen. And they didn't have the moat set up yet.
You know, the moat. Come on now. We didn't have the moat set up yet. God, didn't you think about that? There's no curb appeal at Castle Plun-Darr without a moat.
No, not at all. Not at all. And matter of fact, they have the Brutemen set up a barricade right before. Do that work. Make a barricade before we hide you in Castle Plun-Darr. In
the room. In the random room with the wood door.
Where they just stand. They just stand in there. Stand and question where they are. So, the Thunder Tank breaks through this barricade, and Lion-O enters the castle while the rest of the cats split up and go around the sides and back of the mutants' fortress. Chitara encounters Jackalman, Tiger runs into Monkey-In, and Panther squares off with Sly. This is a great way of actually showcasing all three of the Thundercats away from Lion-O, because we see Tigra fighting Monkey-In, and Monkey-In's like, I could do anything to somebody I can see. But, you know, Tiger can do his bolo whip and go invisible. Chitara goes so fast that Jackalman can't keep up with her. And Panthro was fighting Slive, who he calls, I can't wait to take on that Panther. And then at one point he loses his weapon because Panthro is so mighty. And he's like, you wouldn't fight with someone without a weapon. And Panthro says, I prefer it. And he battles him hand to hand. They're showing the Thundercats off right now. So in the meantime, Lion-O manages to locate the Brutemen's cell and tries to set them free. So he's going in there, he's trying to communicate with them, and they're just gathered around him. They don't understand language. They don't understand what he's speaking.
He's like, you're free. You can leave. You can get out of here. It's kind of like me trying to do my children's homework with them online.
Please, free.
I don't understand. What?
But then Slive...
Warp gas.
Warp gas, yes. He uses this canister of warp gas, which we find out by Panther says was banned. And Chitara's like, are you shocked that the mutants are using a banned, weapon against people? This warp gas turns the normal, gentle Brutemen into zombie-like creatures, but they really don't even honestly do too much to Lion-O. He ends up on the floor, passed out for a minute, but I don't know what they shook him.
No, see, the warp gas is affecting him, and he's trying not to breathe it. It's like, get off of me! The Brutemen are like grabbing, I guess because their bodies they're not very muscular either.
So they overtook him. They crowded him so much that he passed out, and then they left the room.
They had at him. They had
at Lion-O, because he ends up on the floor for a moment.
Because he can't use the Sword of Omens.
Right, he's not going to attack them.
He doesn't attack the Brutemen. He knows that there's something wrong, because he also smells the gas because he's in the same room or the same.
But it's also, he mentions that it's making him angry as well. So he has an idea that this gas makes people angry and feel all
sort of
kinds
like being
of
on Facebook. Makes me angry too, Lion-O.
Yeah. So this is when the vapors cause the meat creatures to turn into raving monsters, and then they start attacking Lion-O. They turn their attention to Panthro once Lion-O's passed out, because Slive is leading Panthro to the room. So he has the door opens, and these Brutemen come out of their cage that they were in. This one room, like we said, that they were standing in. So he throws another canister of gas, but Lion-O uses the Sword of Omens force field to push the gas back towards the mutants. So this is great. We're seeing that the Sword of Omens, again, does everything, and he almost makes a force field, but a wind ability. The force field blew back the gas as well.
And Slide is like, hold your breath! The warpath!
So he says, yeah, the mutants now end up being on the receiving end of the Brutemen's rage and quickly retreat inside the castle. They get the Brutemen reversed on them at this point. The Thundercats are still left with these ravenous Brutemen. Lion-O is still refusing to attack them, but again, Lion-O's pride, because he is truly a kid in heart, and he is a newly appointed leader, and this is all new to him. You know, he believes that the Lord of the Thundercats should not run, and you have to stand up and fight. And this is when Cheetara says one of the lines that David's always appreciated.
Something to the effect of, pride is a good thing, but pride taken too far is foolish.
Because Tigra is, again, as well, he notes to Lion-O that these people they're under a gas, and this is not their natural state. And if you did attack these creatures, you would be attacking basically innocents, because they have no idea what they're doing, and they're a gentle breed.
I don't even think the Sword of Omens would allow him to attack them. He'd have to physically do it.
But it allows him to do a force field, but actually at this point, he's still standing down, and before anything really happens, the gas at least wears off. And instantly you see the Brutemen, their eyes become clear. They were red with anger, and then they go back to a nice, I want to say, shade of blue.
They used clear eyes. Wow.
So this is wonderful, because the Brutemen all snap out of the gas all at once, but they're all just standing there because they have no idea that this also means that they're free. But Lion-O keeps trying to tell them that they are free. He does raise the Sword of Omens and say, "You're free." And actually, I don't know if you noticed this, the crowd does say free, free. So I guess they're able to...
They understand certain things. I guess the word freedom, they're trying to say that freedom... There's actually a few things about this episode I really like. So there's the quote of Cheetara saying that pride is a good thing, but basically pride taken too far is foolishness. I 100% agree with that. I don't think that's exactly the verbatim what she quote, but it is pretty what she says.
These poor creatures can't help what they're doing, Lion-O. You mustn't fight them. I won't fight them, but the Lord of the Thundercats can't run.
Lion-O, pride can be a good thing, but pride carried too far is foolishness.
It's almost like the price of freedom, what freedom is to people. It sets up the fact that the mutants now have a stronghold just as bad as the Cat Slayer. It sets up the fact that, again, there's another race of beings on this planet that are docile. It sets up the fact, kind of the duality for me, that it's such a harsh place and scary and bubbling plasma, oceans of creatures and horrible things. But there's also these very kind.
Just wait, people, till we get to further episodes. The terrain,
the Burbles and the Brutemen, which you never see again. That's it. You see the Brutemen once, I think. Through the whole series, I've never seen.
You kind of see them in background. From what I remember, I think they might be backgrounds, Third Earthians, if they have a gathering of all the creatures of Third Earth. I believe.
Mamra is nowhere to be seen, so this again is an episode that Mamra takes a bow out.
And don't you think that's actually working in his favor? Mumm-ra is built up, especially after the last time we saw him. We are seeing that he is pure evil. The last time we did see him, he was able to be stopped by his reflection in Lion-O's shield claw. But they're not using him every episode. We saw him once now. We know that Mumm-ra's out there, but they are setting up enough that the mutants are a separate entity. Yes, they all work together.
Well, the mutants, they're doing a few things. First of all, you were right. They're setting up the abilities of each Thundercat separately, what their abilities are, what they can do, that they can stand alone if they have to by themselves. They don't necessarily need every other Thundercat with them, even though it's a team effort, and that's the way you should always kind of approach these things. You really shouldn't go it alone. All these characters and all these movies and shows, they always make the mistake of going by themselves to to prove something or because they feel like they're inadequate or whatever. So the fact is they kind of split apart. So they break apart, divide and conquer, so to speak. So they take on the mutants. You see all the different abilities. So it sets up all the Thundercats' different abilities, more character development or character information on each one, their personalities. Sets up Castle Plun-Darr. Sets up the fact that, again, there's more of these docile creatures out there. It's, again, showing how Lion-O is progressing as an adult, how he's starting to grow. You know, the fact that he took the lessons from Jaga from the previous episodes, that he's not going to attack them, because I think if this had happened the first time, you know, the first time he had the sword, he probably would have went right for them. But Jaga in a previous episode said, don't kill that creature. It has a right to live just as much as you. So he's realizing, so he's growing up. So that's, again, you're seeing a character grow up, despite the fact that in stature he's an adult. He's like a 13-year-old, basically, so growing up. So you got that. You have the fact that the Burbles are really good, amazing allies to have. They're amazing allies to have. They have not only supplied them with food, but they're also willing to help them to build their home, a protective place for home. And I
which benefits everyone on Third Earth, therefore, too, as well.
Yeah, because they're
really
a force of good. You know, you have the Burbles know that the Thundercats will help them through anything. They're allies now.
And this is the first episode as well that each Thundercat are showcased their each individual theme. So, you know, every Thundercat has their own theme when they're battling or on screen. Chitara, Tigra, Panthro. When each one is having a battle with the mutants, they play the respective Thundercats' music, which is a great thing, especially in an 80s cartoon, that, you know, like every time Chitara is coming on the scene, you'll hear her theme, you'll hear Tigra's theme, you'll hear Panthro's theme. The Thunder Tank has a theme. Jaga has a theme.
I do like it. You totally, to me, maybe because we're programmed, because we've seen it so much, that it suits them. And like Panthro is like the most, like, I don't know how to explain it. It's almost like a groovy sort of like blaxploitation film, 1960s, 50s. I don't know. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, he's got a very groovy.
But
they're all kind of like
an upbeat, groovy kind of thing. Tigra is when he does it's more of a mystical sounding thing. And Chitara is like a.
I would say fun.
It's like. It's almost, I almost like see the way the music drags out. It's almost like her running. It goes fast and then it kind of.
So good. What a great point.
It builds up momentum. Whatever, like I can't do that. It builds up a momentum. So it does sound like she's feel of a run for me, at least.
And Snarf has a theme. He's seen at the end in this episode for a moment, but he has a more goofier theme when he comes on. A playful theme.
Wily Kit and Wily Cat.
They have a theme as well. Like every character, I want to say there's no Lion-O theme, but I would say basically, I guess the Thundercats music would be Lion-O's theme, because he is the lead of the Thundercats. This is also the first time, I believe, that we see that the Sword of Omens gives him a warning that his friends are in danger, because he sees that Panthro is in danger with the Sword of Omens in this episode. He does sight beyond sight.
I love that a feature of the sword. I really do. I love the fact that it curls up.
The apertures.
Yeah, the curls up and that his eyes glow and everything. I think it's super cool. Like, the Sword of Omens, I'm sorry, hands down, is so much cooler than Excalibur. So much cooler than He-Man and She-Ra's sword. Although She-Ra's sword does change into like a million things. But as far as like raw ability and cool transformation, like who wants to carry around like a huge sword when it can immediately grow?
His sword
it's an
literally
easy carry.
Folds up. It folds up.
You could throw it into a handbag. You know what I'm saying? If you're backpacking.
Honestly, that's the truth. It folds up. It's
like a dagger that turns into a huge like Viking sword that you can use. So I like that.
Even though She-Ra's sword does do basically equivalents to this, he even has that Sword of Omens come to my hand. So even the Sword of Omens will fly to his hand, a la a Jedi, So yeah, Lion-O's got it going.
But he cannot do what She-Ra does. He cannot say, "All of power of Etheria, come to She-Ra!"
Yeah, or speak to animals and birds.
Because he could have communicated with the Brutemen and said, "You're free, Brutemen, free." She-Ra's sword. Oh god, now I don't know why I'm on She-Ra so much. It's about the Thundercats. But She-Ra's sword is very literal. When she creates a shield, it's a physical metal shield from the sword. When Lion-O creates a shield, it's like a barrier, but he's swiping the sword back and forth to create a kind of a mystical barrier. So there's the difference between the two. One is very physical, like it turns into different things, a cage, a this, whatever She-Ra wants it to turn into, it turns into the object.
And that's why I want to mention again, we've said this before in our first episode, our first review of Thundercats. This again shows that Thundercat, I feel like, is set up as a more mature show than He-Man and She-Ra. Filmation and them were, yes, they wanted to teach children morals and have fun, but He-Man and She-Ra always does keep a more lighter tone in a sense of things, and Thundercats still always gets more to the gritty, the darker, the battle is more realistic. And again, we love He-Man and She-Ra, and I could watch He-Man and She-Ra all day, but there is definitely a difference even in the storytelling between the two shows. And again, not that they have to be linked, but if we're comparing the two shows, I do believe Thundercats still stands up as a stronger show till today. Even watching these episodes.
It's the cruelty of the evil characters. They're cruel. They're actually cruel. In other cartoons, like sure, they do touch upon slavery, but not to the sense that they did it in Thundercats. There is that formula, like bad people will still turn on each other, like Evelyn will turn on Skeletor if she gets the chance.
Continuously.
You know, what do you want, Evelyn? Your power! When she says
or then one day she was just like, what if we take the whatever thing they're searching for and just keep it myself, Skeletor?
You know, there is that, like, but the mutants are evil. They're a little stupid sometimes, like as far as like their follow through. Mumm-ra is completely evil. He's like but he's like deranged evil. Like I don't even like he has been
because
alone
he
for way too long.
Look, let's face it,
he's been alone for too long. He's a shut-in.
He lives by himself, and he's only got 4 statues that speak to him sometimes and then tell him how bad he does.
Yeah, exactly. Can I just tell you that this episode, after watching it again, brought up the fact that a lot of my moral compass was helped along or shaped by these type of cartoons. The phrase about what Chitara says about pride, the fact that at the end when the Brutemen leave, which we didn't mention yet, the Brutemen leave.
That's right.
And Lion-O says something to them. They didn't even say thank you. And Tigress says, did you do it because you wanted someone to thank you, or did you do it because it was the right thing to do? Now, I've used this in real life where I've been with somebody and they've held the door open for somebody, and you know, especially New Yorkers, they'll be like, you're welcome, I held the door open for you, you're welcome. And I actually said this to somebody, I said, did you hold the door open for that person because you wanted them to say thank you, or because you felt it was the right thing to do or the nice thing to do? And they were like, oh, I never thought of it that way. Yes, it would have been nice if the person says thank you courteously, but
right, that would
maybe
be
the person's in a hurry, or maybe they were like, sometimes I'm in a daze when I go into a store, for example, because of COVID and stuff like that. I don't even, like, sometimes I don't even function. Like, I feel like I've lost some of my social skills, believe it or not, in society.
Most definitely. But yeah, maybe these people weren't raised on Thundercats, evidently. You would have held that door, they would have said, why, thank you. And then the Thundercats would have laughed, because they all learned a moral lesson.
It's not like having Lookie and today's episode, did you find me?
Right. And we recently, I had sent David, again, this is not a She-Ra podcast, but I had recently sent David a clip of the original voice of She-Ra, and she mentioned that, you know, these cartoons meant so much to people that she didn't realize when she was doing it, but even the morals of, you know, He-Man and She-Ra telling a kid that if someone is touching them inappropriately, they should tell somebody. And a little girl who was being, unfortunately, molested told somebody because She-Ra told her to. So these cartoons, they really do have strong moral compasses. And Thundercats really was huge on after the adventure, after having this ride and all this action and these evil characters, it always ends with a moral, and the characters are always happy and laughing by the end. I know that might sound crazy, but
some of the stuff is cheesy, but some of it really isn't. You know, some of the quotes that, like, again, those type of quotes are much more adult-like than for a child. I'm sorry. But said in such a way that it's stuck with me. I think it stuck with a lot of people. I'm going to go on a limb and say it really did stick with a lot of people. You know, the storyline and the moral story part of it really did stick with people that watched it. And I think that's why it's also very loved. It's not just love because it's gore or violence, or because it's not. So, you know, there's more to it. There's a love of these things because it's a oh my god, I feel like I'm getting really old. You know when people say it was a kinder, gentler time, so to speak? You know, I remember like people in the 80s were saying, oh my god, if it was only the 60s again when people did this and that. And now people are probably doing the same thing to the 80s and 90s. God, if it was only like the 80s and 90s, people wouldn't be so harsh and so cruel and so this and that. So yeah, I definitely draw a line between the two. Definitely helps me grow as a human being morally, and I commend the people that did it. Obviously, it's a job for them, some people, but at the same time, and they sold action figures, which we should go into that at some point. All the different, we did talk about like the mumm-ra that I got in the mail.
Right, but there is a huge, that's a whole even separate thing, the action figures, and I love that. But but action figures go hand in hand, because when you see characters that you love like this, be it Star Wars, He-Man, She-Ra, Thundercats, you're allowing the kids to then take those characters and then continue their own journeys and almost play out these morals. And they don't make characters like this anymore. And it's not in your face to the point of the whole show didn't revolve around him getting to that point saying, did you do it for thank you? But it works so well in that point, because once the Brutemen or the slavery part is brought up, and then once they're freed, when they say it, it's not just like, oh, it's tacked on. It really fits with everything that they did in that episode. So I didn't know if I mentioned this, but this originally aired on September 12th of 1985. The last Friday of next month will be the next episode of Thundercats. David, do you remember the episode called Mumm-ra?
I do. I actually remember it quite well. I remember it because we're back to Mamra. We went from the
we're back to Mamra.
Mutants to Mamra. We're back to Mamra, and he's a sly little devil.
And yes, in this episode, I'm really excited to go over again, because I even feel like there was a lot of ambiance in this episode of like taking place at night, and the whole plot line of this episode I think is a fantastic idea. That was this week's Thundercat Friday. You can catch us weekly every Friday on the Radical Retro Rewind podcast, where we do our normally scheduled craziness with random things. But we will continue to bring you Thundercats every last Friday of the month, and possibly more and beyond.
Just remember, you don't have to be a Thundercat to be a hoe.
So thank you again. You can reach us at David Universal Appeal 2020, one word, on Instagram, and the Radical Retro Rewind podcast, one word, Radical Retro Podcast on Instagram. Thank you again for joining us. I can't wait, because Thundercats from here on is going to get even more exciting, and the plots are going to just get
You're going to see a unicorn keeper.
and her husband. I can't wait. Thank you again for listening, and we will be back.